Cool. All right. Well, I might make a start. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us here tonight on this summer's evening. I was going to say sunny summer's evening, but I think that's changed dramatically in the last few hours. But thank you all. And we're here to obviously go through our event there, which you can hopefully see on the screen, which is post-COVID engineering, which will look at the future of engineering post-COVID. My name is John Bradbury, and my pronouns are he, him, his. And in my day job, I'm a chemical engineer working at a medical packaging company called Amcor, based here in Winterbourne in Bristol. In my day job, I'm one of the directors of Inter Engineering. And for those of you who don't know what Inter Engineering is, we're a volunteer-led organization that aims to improve diversity and inclusion for LGBT engineers and their supporters in the engineering industry. We've produced some fantastic resources, so please check out our website. We've got some great things on there, including some really great positive role model videos that were produced a few years ago, and they're such uplifting things to watch. And also, if any of you out there are keen to get involved, please find us and get in contact. And you can find all that information on our website, so please visit it. Before I start, formally for the event as well, I'd also like to thank a lot of people who've been involved in making Re-Engineering Pride Week happen, and including yourselves, the audience, our partner organizations, WSP, Building Equality, we've got Atkins, Rolls-Royce, JLR, the Royal Academy of Engineering, and the National Composite Centre and the IET. And then also a bit of a plug, I would also like to thank my boyfriend who created this fantastic trophy you can see here. And all you have to do to enter it is upload a Pride photo with a hashtag #ReEngPride, and you can see the details there. And please do, because we want to give away this trophy, and we also are going to give away our camera as well. So please enter. So getting on to the main event of the evening. The world has changed dramatically in the last few months. For many different industries, things have moved on considerably. Personally, in my industry, medical packaging, our demands have gone up dramatically, and our product mix has changed in a big way. So in my role, in my day job, my role is to make sure that we get those products to our end customers as fast as possible, and also being able to make them in the most efficient way possible. This is also making sure that our co-workers are able to do this safely as well, especially with the new environment, making sure everyone understands their role and responsibilities in the new post-COVID world. So now I'm going to move on and introduce our lovely panel of judges, panelists, sorry, bit of a slip up there. So first, I want to introduce you to Mike. Mike, would you be able to introduce yourself? Oh, Mike, you're on mute.
There we go. Sorry, this is only the second time I've ever used Zoom, so I'm still learning. My name's Mike Whitehead. I'm Operations Director in Civil Aerospace in Rolls-Royce, and I'm responsible for product development and technology. My role, my day job, I guess, is about planning the business. I recently changed role from the engineering and technology director for our operations business, where we design and make all the components that go into gas turbines for the civil aerospace market. And over the years, I've been in many different industries, everything from the steel industry, offshore, marine, nuclear, construction even. In fact, I think one of the few industries I haven't been in is automotive, and I noticed there was a JLR colleague on, so that's one of the ones that I've got to tick off the list later in my career. But most recently, I've joined Rolls-Royce in aerospace, and I guess it's an organisation that has been hugely challenged, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a little while by the COVID situation. As well as my day job, I'm also the internal sponsor in Rolls-Royce of the African Caribbean Pioneering Network, which is a support network for our African Caribbean colleagues. And many people ask me why I got involved. And the reason I would say is because I was asked. it's something that inclusion and diversity has always been something that's interested me, has always been something I've been involved with. And I guess that all started with my early career when I'm a natural introvert. I like my own company. I like my own space and time. I like peace and quiet, and it's very difficult to do the types of jobs we do and be the shrinking violet. So I had to create an environment that's enabled me to be at my best and that I was comfortable in. And as you become a leader, you soon realise that environment is something you need to be able to create for all your colleagues as well, so that they can be at their best. So that sparked my interest, and I've just sort of drifted into it from there. And hopefully my support and the commitment I give to that organisation and to the broader topic is something that has a positive impact. But I'm not the best person to answer that. So I'll pass you back to John.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Mike. The next panelist we've got tonight is Julian. Julian, would you be able to introduce yourself?
Sure thing. As a speaker, not a judge, as you said a second ago, although I do like judging. Hi there, folks. My name is Julian Fatterford. I'm a principal transport planner at WSP. My pronouns are he and him. I'm a civil engineer by background, and I've always focused on the transportation side of engineering, but I've now moved a little bit more into the planning and economic side of transport. So what I'll be talking about today is probably on the planning end of engineering. My day job involves a lot of trains and passenger demand forecasting. So we work with the likes of train companies and Department of Transport, local government, figuring out who is going to be on trains, where, when, how, and why in the future. But I also co-chair our LGBT plus network called Vibe. And I also sit on the national committee of the cross-construction sector LGBT plus group called Building Equality. Yeah, so I've been involved in inclusion throughout my career. Inclusion is important to me, I think, because everyone's different in their own way. And we all deserve to have our differences celebrated in order to be ourselves in the place of work, very similar to what I said a second ago. I think that fostering a culture of inclusion will not only make us happy, more comfortable and welcome in our places of work, but helps us perform better and maintain the passion and joy for the work we do. It's very much important to marry those two together, I think. But yeah, that's me.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. Next, we're going to introduce Mel. Mel, would you be able to introduce yourself, please?
Hi, good evening. My name is Melanie Jackson, pronouns she, her, hers. Inclusion is important to me, I think, for very personal reasons. Growing up through the 1980s and 1990s under Section 28, it's growing up with a feeling that you didn't have any outlet to be who you were in those times, and comparing that to where we are now, where we've come such a long way, makes me feel that this is important. I think with the current forces we've got, it's so easy to slip back to those places where people are forced to feel closeted, as people don't ask how to be open and express themselves and let people be themselves and perform to the best of their ability. I think it's very easy to live a shut away, closeted life. So I think it's, and we've seen our engineering sector within JLR and the automotive industry change hugely over the recent months through shutdown and the company having to keep hugely expensive facilities mothballed to restarting and restarting demand and seeing positive demand being re-triggered and offering still a product from the company that people desire, that they want, and that's looking to the future that we're all going to have, where we can produce low to no emission products that will help people meet their transport needs and the luxury products that they desire going forward. So I think there's a lot of challenges. It's getting electrification and low emissions right. So the big investments going away from producing the next new engines to the getting the battery packs right, getting those manufactured, securing their supply, and getting the support network for and the infrastructure right, so people feel comfortable in buying them and using them. And it's going to be a much bigger effort than just the manufacturers. It's going to be a governmental effort. It's going to be changes demanded by society as well.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you. Alex, our final panelist and not judge, as Julia said before. Would you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. So I'm Alex. I'm a senior program manager at the Royal Academy of Engineering. Sorry about the sirens. London is still very hot, and I live on a main road, which is unfortunate. But yeah, my pronouns are she, her. I have a medical engineering background, and after doing a PhD and spending too many years thinking about tiny niche things, I got a job at the Royal Academy of Engineering in the policy team, where I spend my time understanding engineering realities and articulating them to policymakers. For those of you that don't know, the Royal Academy of Engineering is a charity, a national academy, and a fellowship which brings together the UK's best engineering talent from industry, academia, and sort of entrepreneurs and innovators. It's a fascinating place to work, and I'm really lucky to work somewhere that really truly prioritizes inclusion. But I'm here today because I've been very involved in a lot of the Academy's pandemic response, especially from the policy side, which I'll talk a bit about later. But inclusion is important to me because I just think it's so important that we create workplaces and societies where diverse perspectives can be heard and understood and listened to. And working with engineers at the very cutting edge of technology, it's not hard to imagine sort of scenarios where or unjust scenarios resulting from the development of technology, not because of malicious intent, but just a failure to consider people that are different to them. And sort of working in my normal policy day job in sort of areas such as AI and autonomous systems, it's one of these big concerns that we have, especially given the total lack of diversity in the engineering profession.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you. So now we're going to move on to some of the questions we've got for this evening. So we've heard about some of the challenges that JLR experienced with having to sort of freeze and mothball some of their assets during the COVID period. Mike, would you be able to go through some of Rolls-Royce's challenges and how they overcome them?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the aerospace industry has seen a massive change over the last few months. I think the most recent visible sign of that was the results from IAG, the owners of British Airways, and Willie Walsh talked about a reduction in passenger numbers of 98% between March, April, and May, and that is a complete game changer. You really can't imagine the impact that has. I mean, the aerospace business relies on travel and transport. It relies on connecting different parts of the world, and suddenly the world stopped wanting to be connected. Rolls-Royce Civil Aerospace connects in two ways. First of all, through the large wide-body aircraft, the sort of things you go on holiday to the Maldives or to Thailand or the US or whatever, and that part of the industry has been particularly hard hit. The other area that we're involved with is business aviation. So the larger business aircraft, Gulfstreams and so on. And whilst that's sort of very immediate impact, that we have seen recovery in that part of the industry. Still not anywhere near where it was, but we are starting to see it climb steadily back. I think the biggest challenge for us is knowing when things are going to start to get better. We have seen an improvement, steady improvement in flying hours over the last few months, but that rate of improvement is relatively steady. And we're around about 30% of what we would expect at this time of year, which is a huge impact. So we've been, we've been closing the systems down where we can, stopping activity where we can. We've made maximum use of the generous offer of furlough from the government, for example, and we've tried to find ways to slow the system down and reduce the amount we spend. And I think we've done a pretty reasonable job overall. But the big question is, when does it start up again, and how do we start up the business in a controlled way, and how do we maintain capability? Now, Rolls-Royce isn't just civil aerospace. We have two further divisions. We have the Power Systems division and we have the Defence division. And so one of the things we can take advantage of is that the positive continuation in the defence market that's been maintained. I think a lot of governments have used that to provide ongoing support for industry, and also the Power Systems business, where we still have strong demand. So we have the advantage of a bit of a portfolio, but in the civil aerospace market, it has been extremely hard hit, and has forced us to take some pretty drastic action.
That sounds like quite challenging times, and thank you for sharing.
Very challenging.
I can imagine. Julian, would you like to give perspective from WSP, how your organization's dealt with the situation?
Yeah, so WSP is such a broad range of services and projects, so the impact has been a very mixed bag. So while a lot of my experience and what I'll say today will be from a transport point of view, there's a different level of impact across the board. So from our structural engineering, design teams, to our environment and water colleagues. From a business point of view, we're a professional services firm, so a lot of our work is traditionally desk-based, and therefore widespread working from home was an easy solution. And we're very fortunate in that regard. That said, there are lots of teams that are site-based, and they've felt the impact a little bit more and are working around the restrictions and guidelines. From a project and delivery point of view, it's much more interesting. So every client, supplier, operator, developer, contractor, local authority has questions, and we've been having lots of conversations. I don't want to jump the gun too much with the stuff that we're going to be talking about later, but essentially the rule book has been thrown out the window, and we need to rethink from all sides of the sector, from the engineering, the detailed design and build side, to the planning and the very advisory and the concept sort of services side. So from actually the things we do, it's very, very interesting, and we'll talk about opportunities and challenges later. But distancing doesn't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon. And even though as things do recover and come back, there will be some long-term impacts based on the decisions we make now. I was a bit short and sweet there, but
no, thank you. That's great. And then Alex, from the Royal Academy's perspective, how have you dealt with this situation?
It's been really interesting, and I guess it's sort of working out what a National Academy's role should be in a global emergency. And we've completely refocused a significant portion of the Academy's resources to focus on COVID-related initiatives, and sort of providing rapid evidence reviews and really trying hard to champion that practical engineering advice, and give it the same sort of position alongside the health and science professionals that kind of are the go-to in these scenarios. So I think, yeah, it's really difficult for an organization that relies so much on bringing different groups of people together to discuss different issues, and sort of events were one of our main ways of doing that. So there's been a lot of learning how to use Zoom and online platforms, and trying new ways to create that level of engagement. I think it's especially hard for some of our international programs, where it's all about bringing people, UK academics, together with academics in other countries, trying to create that sort of natural energy that comes from having a chat with someone, or like the innovation that comes from unstructured unstructured conversations has been difficult, and it's all still very much a learning curve. But we've also found out we can do things so much faster than we ever used to be able to, and it's really great not to have to worry about booking a room and instead just get a Zoom link and be very unreasonable and expect people to turn up for an hour-long Zoom in a week's time, rather than giving them time to schedule their trip to London. I think in that sense, we've been a lot more inclusive of fellows and other engineers across the country, and lost our London-centricness, which is a very good thing.
That's good that some positiveness has come out of such a difficult time. That's great. Melanie, what do you see as the biggest challenges or opportunities for the automotive sector in the next few months?
It's purely about making sure that we can keep satisfying demand to there was a huge push to at the start of the crisis to put a lot of stock that the company had on dealers. So as the crisis unfolded and we restarted, it's getting those sold orders to customers and starting up slowly, just to make sure that the wheels of the business can keep turning. I think it is it is very much a case of getting the business really moving, getting those challenges of making sure that we can still produce vehicles safely, design them safely, and we can provide an experience that customers want in an environmentally sustainable way. It's been a tough ask, and seeing the operation changing from running 24 hours a day to running from 3 shifts going down to 1 shift and slowly recovering. I think we're in a period of about 2 years to get back up to what they were, and people are really asking what they want out of these purchases. I think people's needs for transportation have been questioned, and I think people are looking for the right form of transportation, rather than it just being in some cases just a lifestyle accessory as well as a form of transportation. And I've seen the company really embrace what people want from those needs, and respond to them.
Oh, that's fun. It's quite interesting. A lot of different people are adapting, I guess, their way of living now, especially a lot of people not using transportation as much, especially in the last few months. Julian, what do you see that sort of transitioning in terms of the transport sector, in terms of public transport in particular?
Yeah, a lot of people say, will we ever get back to pre-COVID life? And you know, we need to ask ourselves, do we even want pre-COVID life as it was? And yeah, so we need to start thinking about what do we want to keep and what do we not want to keep. We really get an opportunity right now to stop, like we do right now, to stop and think about things. And given where we have this major shock to the system, we can consider what the future will look like. So the industry is going to change a lot, both from the actual doing the engineering, the business side. So again, here there's a business side and there's a transport side. So I'll deviate a bit from the question, but so obviously from a business point of view, I think people have realized just how easy it is to work from home. And that's going to have a major impact on the way of working in the future, as I don't think that will ever recover to pre-COVID levels. So that will have an impact on the transport industry side of things with regards to transport, with a reduction in commuting and business trips. Might look a little bit different to the leisure market, but I can get to that later. But similar to what Melanie was saying about why people travel and what for. But in terms of commuter and business travel, we're going to see that massively reduce. But there's a lot of changes that we can challenges as well that this will drive. But I think just before the pandemic hit, there was a lot of momentum in the decarbonisation agenda, and every industry was looking for ways to address the climate emergency. So in transport, a lot of this effort was focused on electrification, both electric vehicles and infrastructure. I'm sure Mike and Melanie will have words to say on this as well, but also looking to move users away from carbon intensive modes such as the private car, which is currently carbon intensive, but might not be in the future based on what decarbonisation engineering we have, but looking towards moving them to public transport and active travel modes like walking and cycling. Look, we've seen a widespread reduction in travel overall, which is brilliant for reducing our energy consumption. I think I remember some sort of stat about how most of the energy consumption in the UK so far has been green energy because the demand was so low that we'll be able to meet it with renewable energy. So it's fantastic. But travel is expected to recover. And the question is how? So it was similar to a question that Melanie just asked. So with a massive reduction in public transport usage, we're seeing a big increase in walking and cycling over small distance journeys, which is fantastic. But we're also seeing a large uptake in car usage for longer distance journeys, which is something we need to be wary of. I'm not saying the car isn't necessarily bad, but in its current form with the mix of electricity in the grid and the majority of cars being with non-renewable fuel sources, we need to plan and design around this in the advance of the uptake of electric vehicles. So I said before, we're having a lot of conversations about this. This is like, that was a big fat problem statement. And the future is still very uncertain, and we're monitoring things every single day, as I'm sure everyone on this call is monitoring things every single day. But what we've got is a great opportunity, but I've been asked to talk about that later on, so I won't talk about opportunities just yet.
Fantastic, thanks, Julian. Just while I remember as well, if anyone has any questions as we're going, please put them in the chat, and then we'll come to them at the end of the session. I've got my admin person to the side of me directing me. So Mike, with the aerospace industry seeing a huge drop off in demand, will the UK still be a leader in the aerospace manufacture and design?
Well, I could answer it really glibly, couldn't I? Believe the answer is yes. I'm the eternal optimist. We have a tremendous industry in the UK, and engineering generally, and aerospace particularly. And I think that this period has undoubtedly delayed some of the developments. But we're very active in pursuing technology for the future. And our technology has always been focused, frankly, on reducing carbon emissions of the products we produce and making sure that we have a sustainable industry. And what we're finding is that desire to have those products for the future that fulfill those needs to reduce carbon emissions and fit in with the environmental agenda hasn't changed, isn't any different. And that research continues. Our focus on sustainable aviation fuel, for example. If you think about large aircraft, these sort of twin aisle aircraft, I always describe those as they're essentially a power station with wings. They're a huge power generator, and the idea that will become battery powered or hybrid in the near term is just impractical. We haven't solved the engineering issues behind those yet. Not true in smaller aircraft. We're doing research into all electric aircraft. Hopefully later this year we'll fly the world's fastest all electric aircraft that we've designed and developed the power plant for and worked in collaboration to deliver. So I think that sort of history of innovation and desire to solve the engineering problems around us and the desire to use engineering for the betterment of society is just something that's in the DNA of most engineers, and they want to solve problems and fix things, and we'll continue to do that. In Rolls-Royce, we're involved not just in aviation, but hybrid powers, electrification, power generation. We've got applications or ideas around small modular reactors, for example, we know for zero carbon applications. As I say, we were involved in electric flight demonstrators and things like that. The range of technologies we're involved in is huge. And yes, we've got a temporary delay maybe to some of that activity, but the research and technology that underpins the future of this industry continues, and the focus continues on developing solutions to everyday problems that we will see.
That's fantastic. Thank you. That's really good to hear. And then we're sort of flipping to collaboration and sort of innovation. Alex, what's the Royal Academy been advising on in terms of COVID during these times?
Thanks, John. So I guess pausing for a moment on innovation, as the crisis started, the Academy decided to set up a cross-organisation response group. We called it Positive Response Programme because it was all about trying to do something useful in a time of crisis. And so with that, we set up different work streams. First, there was brokerage, where we put out a big call for ideas to the engineering community to find out what engineers were working on, what innovations they had that might be useful, and also just get a bit of an understanding of what the engineering dimensions of the crisis were going to be. Through that, we received sort of 600 responses, everyone sort of volunteering their facilities, their expertise. And with a group of fellows, we sort of triaged these ideas and innovations and sort of found ways to support them through our networks. And it was just really reassuring to see all these positive, all these positive inventions and innovations coming together. But also it taught us the importance of properly understanding your problem and sort of having that insight from the front line or someone with a very, very clearly defined need. It was much easier to work with solutions based around those than sort of the slightly left field, maybe exciting, but very difficult to say whether it would work or not. Then we also had a programs set up where we've been giving out grants to people in universities in the UK and global innovators who have been sort of doing everything from making novel PPE to biodegradable coffins. So it's quite the spread. And then alongside that, we thought it was really important to communicate success stories and tell the world about the good things engineering was doing, and especially in that collaboration, that collaboration piece is really interesting, sort of speaking to Rebecca Shipley from UCL on their ventilator challenge, and just that at the start of the pandemic, she had a pint with someone from someone from Mercedes, and they just got things up and moving really quickly. And these success stories are really important. And how can we take that sort of really societally focused innovation and the way of delivering it fast and embed that in our structures going forward? It'd be really nice to find out the ways to take the good stuff and get rid of the less good stuff that comes with being in a pandemic. And then in terms of your actual question about what we've been advising government on, so it's been varied, to say the least. So we've been inputting a bit to the SAGE advisory system, the Science Advisory Group for Emergencies. And yeah, I've learned a lot more about ventilation than I expected to. I know lots about ventilation on public transport and in hospitals now, wasn't expecting to do that. Also learning a lot about how the effectiveness of UV light and how that can be used to sort of kill the virus, the airborne nature of the virus in hospitals or then also trying to understand its applicability for enabling PPE to be reused, so that we hopefully don't experience the shortages that we've seen this time round. So those are some of the themes that we've been covering. And when we get these questions, sometimes one of them, I think I had about 12 hours to respond, which was too short, but we reach out across the engineering profession, really drawing in the professional engineering institutions as well. It's been really great for us to cement our National Engineering Policy Centre, which we've been sort of developing this partnership. I think there are 42 organizations now, it keeps changing, but yeah, it's really cementing that partnership in place and delivering value both for us, being able to access the really specific expertise, the people that know about air modeling in trains or whatever, and then being able to sort of show value for them and them feel like their opinions are getting to the places they want the information to be, and the expertise is heard, which is great. Yeah, so those are some of the themes that we've been investigating over the last while.
That's fantastic. Thank you. It sounds quite broad, and it sounds like quite a fun challenge to be a part of in obviously troubling times, but I can imagine the challenge is quite rewarding. Thank you for sharing it. That's really, really cool. Julian, with social distance, we're talking about train ventilation here, so I thought very nice segue into your area. With social distancing, masks, restrictions on travel being the new norm for the immediate future, how will the transport sector adapt?
The desire to travel isn't going away anytime soon, so people are going to want to travel. I mentioned some things, well, I was going to mention some things about what we're doing to plan and adapt to circumstances. Actually, let me just scroll up on some of my notes. There's a lot that we're doing to adapt in terms of the way we design the places around us. In terms of social distancing, masks and restrictions in the immediate future, it's already happening, and it's already happening quite well. I think we just we know people will return once they have the confidence to do so. So what I haven't really mentioned is journey purpose. So I think that there'll be long-term impacts to business and commuting when it comes to but when it comes to the leisure market, I think it's just waiting to bounce back. And I'm sure we'll see recovery, if not overcompensate, once we have a medical solution to COVID-19. And that's when I think things like these restrictions will change. The more interesting bit is what we change in the long term due to this disruption in the short term. So I mean, there's a lot of things that we are doing in the transport sector, and it's a really good opportunity to do these changes. So as the saying goes, never waste a good crisis, and we've got a really incredible opportunity on our hands if we properly harness it. So transport itself is very broad, and there are many subsectors to it. So I've actually asked a number of my colleagues about their thoughts too about this, precisely this question, and I've kind of amalgamated it in what I'm about to say. So one of the main challenges is confidence. We've mentioned it on lots of things. Mike and Melanie said it as well. Alexandra, you mentioned it as well. And this whole messaging of do not use transport is not going to be overturned very easily. You can use public transport now until COVID-19 isn't an immediate threat anymore. So the opportunity is to backfill that loss of demand, and how we can do that. As I mentioned before, we've got the chance to stop and think now, and redesign. So in the intimate recovery phase was mask distancing, keeping people safe, but then what's next? So as we mentioned before, and this is not me trying to any sort of car bashing here. I appreciate JLR's on the line, but we're trying to backfill that demand with modal shift from cars to bus and rail over longer distances, and onto walking and cycling over shorter distances, at least until there's a more decarbonized future for the car industry. But otherwise, we risk undoing decades of progress of getting people out of their cars and onto rail and bus. Now, if that shifts too much the wrong way and rail starts to become less viable, there's a risk that public transport becomes less accessible, fewer trains, line closures, stopping bus routes, and we start building more roads, which doesn't help our decarbonisation agenda. But I'll talk a bit more about that in a bit. But I don't think it comes to that. So colleagues of mine have already worked on a number of schemes across our many parts of transport, and it doesn't actually get that much media attention. Our media attention is saturated with so many other things that actually the great work that our engineers and our planners and everyone's doing doesn't really get that on there. So there's a lot of helping the here and now response. And there's recovery planning for the future. But for example, so my transport planning colleagues, they're working with local authorities on emergency cycle lanes by removing road traffic lanes to help those who don't own cars to get to work safely. Again, not trying to car bash, but my rail colleagues, including myself, are working with network rail and train operators, looking at onboard capacity, distancing in vehicles, but adequate supply of trains, optimizing the timetable to ensure that we can safely carry passenger demand with distancing guidelines, but also moving transport staff and the way they work, because they're also employees of the transport network. It's currently what I'm actually working on. And my transport modeling colleagues are looking at pedestrian flow modeling, concourse capacity, ensuring pinch points of our transport system are identified and managed. All those kind of things are happening right now. But also, hopefully, some of those things will stick for the future. But it's a lot of that constant monitoring of data on the day-to-day, and lots of discussions and planning for the immediate and distant future. But the government is acting too, which is great. I don't know, again, it hasn't really been pushed in the media that much, but millions of pounds of funding have already been allocated to things like emergency active travel schemes or stimulus packages into the way we build. There'll be lots of stuff about build. Whether or not it's a good thing, we can maybe discuss in the Q&A later. But we are using this opportunity, and from what I can tell, we're using it well. There's a lot of work still to do, and I can go on for this for ages, but I'm wary that I'm rambling on now. But actually, no, I'm gonna, forgive me, I'm gonna continue a little bit longer to answer the actual question about what we've adapted to. Mainly because I flew to Germany in July to visit my mother who lives out there, and I could see that the aviation ecosystem has already transformed. I actually felt much more confident at Heathrow than I did in Tesco. It was completely successful adaptation to the current environment. So you got extra push notifications on QR codes on things, complemented with announcements, wayfinding, and train staff. So despite constantly evolving rules and regulations and uncertainty, they're very much on the ball. And so while I mentioned a moment ago things like road layouts and active travel schemes, I think a big key thing to our recovery and response is technology. And I've seen it already, people using things, increasing booking slots for staff, tables and spaces, or mobile payments, checking in for things for tracking and tracing, and video calling. I mean, it's COVID-19 has brought about this digital transformation, and not just Zoom like we're on now, but and so back to public transport. The UK public transport is so based on paper ticketing. I can see that disappearing faster than it would have organically, and it already has. So in rail, there are reservation-only services now. You can use it on your mobile app. You can pick your seats, and they're all distanced out, and it's brilliant. So I've seen the industry jump up, adapt, and perform it, which under the circumstances I think is quite impressive. But sorry for absolutely going off on a ramble there. I just thought it was a really exciting moment to try and get all of that out. So I hope that was useful, valuable.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you, Julian. It really positive, and obviously you mentioned car bashing in there a little bit, so I think it's fair to come back to Melanie.
Yeah, feel free to send it back my way.
So Melanie, as part of the automotive sector changes, what sort of things do you see as the challenges for the sector coming forward?
It is really the cost of the product. To get a green product, I'm actually seeing, if I look at the industry, certain product lines just start evaporating. So the cost that a consumer pays for a small vehicle at the moment, the small family hatchback, is the equivalent to the cost for an organisation like JLR to procure a battery for an electric vehicle. So the economics of certain forms of transport disappears. So it is a case of what do we provide for those segments. And I think JLR, another organisation, have marvelled in wonder at what Tesla has achieved for those sectors, and getting their electric vehicles at an affordable price point, and becoming one of the top 10 sellers and the largest growing product in Europe. But I think there's I think the right incentives have got to be there, given that we've got this cost background for those products. We've seen the right incentives had one of JLR's products, our electric vehicle, being the top seller in Holland for 1 month not too long ago. So it is about getting the right price, the right affordability going forward, and seeing how those investments are structured. It's been well publicised that JLR took a huge bet on diesel for the impact then to be understood at a much broader level about what the environmental impact was of diesel engineering, and for the incentives to disappear for those. We've seen incentives now really favouring electric vehicles, and in the shorter term hybrids, but we've seen also that it takes a number of years to get those product lines out there. Looking at the planning going forward, it's the bigger organisations, the bigger competitors may be able to get there a little quicker than JLR. As we've actually seen, unfortunately, we've had to, the organisation has started to prioritise investment, and what would have been very promising new lines coming out. We've seen those products and projects being put on hold for a period while we try and get through this period. And we've seen still a third of the organisation being remaining on furlough, and I've been responsible for calling people back off furlough to make sure we can keep doing certain tasks. So I'm sorry to those people whose probably well-deserved unexpected break I've cut short, but it is a time of huge change, and it's at a time after the product had remained fairly static for a number of years, and only really progressing with progress in consumer electronics and your devices, which are now integrated with CarPlay and Android Auto into the vehicle, but it's giving those device experiences that people really desire. And the other driver being slowly increasing until recent years emissions standards, now becoming a fully fledged race to a carbon-free economy. I've looked at some of the requirements that we have to keep data on some of our internal combustion engine vehicles, and I'm working out, hang on a minute, that we're asking to keep data on a product after it's become effectively banned. So I'm thinking, hang on a minute, the move to zero carbon, we're holding data on products that will not be used in that time. So it is quite astonishing to see how quickly we're in what borders between evolution and revolution in the sector. And it's good to see that the company has responded, but it's also been a huge change in direction for the company, and it's been seen and in the media that the company took huge write-downs on its investments on diesel. But it is about ensuring that we've got the right incentives both for the organisation and for individuals to make those moves. I think the level of uncertainty, as in the situation with COVID, doesn't help the organisation to make the right changes. I think we've got to have have the right level of certainty that gets people in the right direction. So I think that those are the pressures we see going forward, and how we're trying to respond to them. And I think it will. I think we are doing working on them quite hard on those challenges.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you, Mel. I imagine it must be quite difficult as well, bringing people back from a furlough at times,
Yes.
especially when they start to make certain plans.
Yes.
I know people in my own household have been wishing for that themselves, but unfortunately they hadn't got it. A bit of a joke there. It obviously can be quite difficult. So I might change tact a little bit now to focus a little bit around diversity and inclusion. So Mike, what role do you see for inclusion groups now in this post-COVID world?
I'm not sure that I see a different role for them in post-COVID than pre-COVID, to be honest. I mean, the way that they work in Rolls-Royce, and I think many organisations, is to provide a support network, something that people can use to access information and knowledge, and principally to connect people and to sort of free up communication. You know, some people don't feel comfortable discussing diversity and inclusion issues with the person they meet the first day in the job. The networks we set up are there to help and support those people and to bring people close together and just give them an opportunity to talk and realise that actually, you know, I've never met two people that are the same, and I've never met two people that don't actually have a lot in common when you get down to it. So they create an environment where you can bridge those gaps and where there can be specialist support and help if that's what's needed. And in many cases, that's not what's needed. It's just, it becomes a social thing that creates connectivity, gets discussions out into the open that otherwise might not, and that encourages connections and support. I also think certainly in Rolls-Royce, the senior leadership support for these organisations is incredibly positive, and it's something that it breaks down the barriers and it enables communication to happen across layers that probably wouldn't normally exist in business. And it's also a means of connecting externally. So the organisations tend to get involved in a lot of STEM activity in addition to the general population. They tend to get involved in a lot of activity to connect up with each other and sort of help communication through into the unions and through into the staff organisations and so on. So they're really just a forum for inclusion, if I can put it that way. And then in an industry like Rolls-Royce, where, like many engineering organisations, safety is a part of the day-to-day world we live in, creating an environment where people feel comfortable to speak up as an integral part of business. It's not just a nice to have, it's one of those things we need on a day-to-day basis. So it all helps with creating that environment that makes people feel safe and able to speak up and talk about things that concern them.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. Julian, do you have any thoughts on the future of inclusion and diversity in terms of your perspectives? You're quite
definitely. And yeah, this is very similar to the question that Mark and you have already written in the chat, what Mark had asked and Kaz has written a really good response to. So maybe we can read that later in the Q&A.
Oh no,
talk
please,
about it more.
please just delve into it now. We're sort of in the Q&A section now, so please do.
Sure. I mean, so okay, so I've got a little bit written, but I move on the question that Mark had asked, which is very much on topic of this. I'm scrolling up. Well, what impact does the panel think the pandemic will have on the progression of equality in engineering in general? So I think this is kind of where we are in the conversation. And Kaz's answer, I hope Kaz, it's all right if I read it out. Was in the short term, I think there was a threat to equality in engineering. In times of redundancy, I feel that certain groups may be more susceptible than others. Also, the absence of face-to-face meetings and visibility in the workplace can lead to people forgetting about past progress, and initiatives by employee resource groups are more difficult to implement. Managers may say to themselves, we have more important things to think about, and hopefully in the long term, there's just a blip, but nothing is predictable. And that really resonates with me. It marries a lot to what Mike just said, but this short term versus the long term. And hopefully it's just a blip, but we need to recognize that there's a change, a disruption, and we need to recognize it and plan for it. I was having a discussion in our LGBT network about what we think inclusion will look like, and we think that the businesses in general need to make a much more concerted effort to bring people together after this, now that we've got a lot of distance and widespread working from home, and people might not necessarily get to that face-to-face or that FaceTime anymore, i.e. we want more budget. But and then we need to actually recognize that there's a risk there, and we need to plan for it. Which is quite interesting, sort of that was very generic business point of view in terms of employee resource groups and how we need to start thinking about how to plan things, not just doing digital events, but also how do we bring people together? How do we raise the profile? But that's something that we've been talking about. But in terms of COVID-19 and distancing in general has on diversity and inclusion, not necessarily in the business sense. I think about this a lot actually from a transport point of view, because and the interlinkage between the two, because I think travel and transport is at the very core of inclusion. I think it enables us to experience the way other people live and work. It gives us perspective, understanding, diversity of thought, going to other places and experiencing other things. Without travel, we become insular and move towards more closed-mindedness. And I think that's something to avoid. And I think that's a risk, and we need to work hard to make sure that doesn't change. As I'm not saying that everyone's suddenly going to become racist and homophobic, but if the aims of networks like ours is to raise the visibility and amplify the voice of minority groups, such as the LGBT+ community, but other protected characteristics, of course, as well, it's much harder to do so with these distancing restrictions. Not all doom and gloom. So having said that, though, I will make the point that what I have seen a lot more recently is a general increase in compassion and understanding of our peers and colleagues. So from amount of homeschooled children running around the background of MS Teams calls, or colleagues adopting alternative working hours, I think people are putting themselves in other people's shoes a lot more and are being more accommodating, which is also the essence of inclusion. So they call it social distancing, but I think it's anything but that. It's not socially distanced. We're physically distanced, but judging by the number of calls I've had with people over the past months, we're very much socially included. So COVID-19 has most definitely had possibly a positive impact on the way we work with and around our fellow colleagues as a whole. But there is still that underlying risk that leaving minority groups such as the LGBT+ community behind if we don't make this concerted effort to raise profiles, which is why events like these are so great to keep the conversations going. While I have the mic, just one last final point I'd like to make, because I think it's pertinent to kind of what we said before. When I was talking about the risk of public transport being eroded, if there is a shift towards private car, not doing car bashing, but just in general, a shift towards that, and it's social mobility. Much of our workforce relies on public transport as a way to access their places of work from the places they can afford homes. And a deterioration of our service provision of public transport could possibly increase the class divide. As in, that's me being dramatic, but we shouldn't forget that many key workers that were keeping the country moving and working in our hospitals over the past months use public transport. Now, if we can't make public transport safe and provide people with the confidence to use it to save it from being defunded, for example, we risk compromising inclusion in the widest sense. So these are all the kinds of discussions we're having, and it's quite difficult. And so we've got a lot of work to do, but it has everything to do with inclusion.
No, that's fantastic, and no, great comments there. Sorry, my admin person was distracting me then a little bit. Looking after the puppy. So one of those things you're just talking about, that kids running around in the background. I was going to move on to some of the questions that we've had so far, which have been fantastic. You touched upon one of them. I've also had one from Lynn, Lynn has also been organising some of the Re-Eng events, and she has done fantastic work on the quiz. And it was really good. You can also check it out on YouTube if you really want to get involved and learn a little bit more about LGBT stats. I was winning at one point, but I lost. But that's enough about me. So Lynn's question, I'll open it up to the panel, so please answer as you'd like. What were some of the positives coming out of the pandemic that you hope will continue?
Go on. Yeah. Sorry, is somebody else going to say something? I'll offer my opinion on this, I guess, and it follows on from Julian's point. One of the things I've found fascinating is the view you've had into people's houses, and the fact that you started to, I often find that you're in a meeting and somebody walked past in the background, or the dog will bark or whatever, but it does give you an insight into people's lives. You work with these, I think I know my team pretty well, but I've never met many of their partners, and having those conversations and opening up, I think that's been a real positive. I think the way that the video has sort of enabled that in your team meetings, to bring in a broader community has been quite fascinating. And I also like Julian's point, I have to say about travel and the importance of travel. I do think travel and meeting different people in different parts of the world is something that makes life so much richer and so much more positive. And I think that there will be a return to travel as soon as people can practically do it. So I do think that there's been some real positives through this process. I do think compassion's increased, people helping out other people, but all those things that you sort of have almost become normal now. I think those are huge positives that we shouldn't lose sight of. And I think as well, the response of engineering communities generally, we've been involved in helping scale up production of ventilators and things like that. So when you haven't got your day job to do, you go and find something else to do, you find something positive to do. And I think that's been hugely positive as well. Thank you.
That's fantastic. I agree. Like a little bit what Alex was sort of saying before, the collaboration and the outreach from the engineering community has been absolutely fantastic. And it's sort of been very inspiring seeing companies like Rolls-Royce going out and doing something that's not typical for them. It's been really cool to watch.
And I don't think that would have happened organically. So obviously there's a lot of negativity to it, but I think that this is a really good opportunity. Again, never waste a good crisis, but it has really made us stop and think and do things that wouldn't have happened otherwise, and in the name of inclusion. So there's so many positives. It's such a good, it's so great to hear, Mike.
Fantastic. Mel, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I'd say collaboration. I've seen it improve such a lot. So where you've had challenges with stakeholders in the face of a crisis, some of the boundaries coming down. So it is a case where we're getting more inclusion during the crisis. You realise you're in a shared situation here, and I'm seeing some of the boundaries in organisation coming down, and also innovation. JLR designing and getting a 3D printed visor out there initially during the shutdown period to healthcare workers and distributing those, and also support packages we've made and donated to those organisations, vehicle donations to those organisations. But the innovation just to get something out there, get it made, and it's now part of my equipment. I've got my company branded visor, but it solves a very practical problem on the line in the manufacturing environment. When you take your mask in a loud environment, people are relying on your movement of your lips to try and gauge what you're communicating. With a visor, you're getting the protection, but you can rely on those visual cues and lip reading to perform the communication in those tasks in that environment, and getting that collaboration back between colleagues. So it's and seeing that being just something homegrown that was turned out quite quickly, first 3D printed, then given to one of our suppliers, and has hit a volume production that they've gone to market to other organisations as well. As it's that responsiveness and that level of collaboration has been very positive.
No, that's fantastic, and I agree, especially for those who have sort of hearing difficulties as well. Like those sort of visors are fantastic. So Mark has a question for Alex. He's interested to understand how the pandemic has helped deepen the academics' relationship with engineers, the engineering businesses working in healthcare.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, so I guess we've always had a bit of a healthcare strand to a lot of our work, recognizing that it's one of the places where engineering can really offer quite a transformative change. But in this instance, it's been about completely, when we normally are talking about healthcare, it's things like the role of digital technologies or solutions for sort of surgical solutions for low or middle income countries, and it tends to be those kind of themes, whereas this has been a very different demand, and it's a different kind of engineering healthcare business that we've kind of needed to tap into. So that's where the professional engineering institutions have been really helpful, and specifically the Institute of Healthcare Engineering Estates Management have been ace, because they're the people on the ground running the hospitals, understanding how the oxygen flows work, or understanding how the different technologies deployed, how the plumbing systems in hospitals work. I've learned about all sorts of things that I just didn't realize were going to be relevant, but it's really interesting. And then we've also sort of been reaching out to different manufacturers to understand how they make PPE and the different expectations on PPE. Some of my colleagues have been setting up a bit more capacity in Africa and trying to support people in our African networks to be able to make PPE on the ground. And they've learned all sorts about the different testing standards, had lots of contact with the medical device regulators and British standards, etc. So it's, there's been a lot of new relationships built throughout this process, and I've become a lot more aware of job roles and things that I just hadn't really given much thought to before. So it's been really interesting, and it's just that common goal that everyone else has been talking about, just really focusing everyone's mind, making them incredibly generous with their time and their expertise. It's really reassuring. I don't want loads more pandemics, but similar needs, if we can take things like diversity and things like net zero, which have both been discussed, and channel everyone's energy on those topics as well, that would be a great outcome. And I completely agree with Julian that I think we're at a point where we can re-envisage what we want from engineering in the future and sort of the society that we live in, and we should really be taking this moment of pause to set the right directions forward from here.
No, that's very, very, very true and very inspiring. And I understand what you mean about the I think from my own perspective, people have in my organization have really started to appreciate the fact that what they do makes a difference, which before they would have never really sort of maybe put the two together in a broad strokes, but it makes such difference when you become an essential worker. All of a sudden you realize that what you're doing every day is making a huge difference to the world. But no, thank you. Cool. We've got another question from Lynn here. Sorry, I think I went to the wrong one there. What do you think? Do you think we'll ever get back to face-to-face Pride events? And where will we all get together to celebrate diversity and inclusion? I could probably answer some of this if you like.
Go ahead, John.
So I used to volunteer for Bristol Pride, and still have a little bit of contact with them, so I sort of feel a little bit in the loop. So face-to-face Pride events are going to be very interesting. Like Julian said before, until a medical sort of intervention comes out, we're still going to have to consider things like social distancing in the next year to come, maybe especially. Government guidelines, especially around those close-knit events, such as a Pride Festival, are going to be very, very different to what they were recently. So I think a lot of that's going to come down to the people in the medical fields to look at getting vaccines and things like that out there. Or alternatively, have events that are less congested, which I know could be not as fun. But hopefully, we've had some marches and some protests through the cities during the pandemic. Hopefully we can learn from those colleagues about what they did during that time and maybe adapt that to a Pride March, because Pride Marches, in my view, are some of the most empowering and most inspiring parts of a Pride Festival. I know it might feel like we all just walk down the streets in London, but going to some of those local prides, you really, really understand the power and impact that they have. Does anyone else have any comments on that one?
I mean, I think you've covered it. There will be some sort of medical solution to the coronavirus crisis and pandemic. And when it comes, we don't know exactly what's going to happen. There's various musings about vaccination or various treatments. And I'm not in any way, shape or form smart enough to understand any of that. But Pride in person is not going to go away anytime soon. And we can hope for it to next summer to be the case where we can get very close to each other again. I'm gunning for it based on what I have heard from medical advancements and vaccine trials and this, that, and the other, but possibly not before then. I think I talk to my friends and family in Australia a lot, and they don't know what, because their Mardi Gras season is in February, whether or not it's February to March. That's a little bit dicier, I think. Hopefully, we might go from wave to wave. Different countries will be on different parts of that sort of recovery journey. But I think by summer, hopefully there'll be some sort of medical solution. But that's all I know. So I'm still gunning for next summer, if you like, in terms of a date. But the desire for it and the demand for it is not going away anytime soon. People want, and it's a priority, I think, in the inclusion realm, to get together again face to face, to have those moments of celebration, to bring people from minority groups together. When is just such an uncertain question.
So Kaz, would you like to chip in your insights into this as well, being one of the key organisers for Southwest Trans Pride? If you like Kaz, that is. You don't have to. But I thought I'd loop you in there if you don't mind. I'll unmute you.
I wasn't expecting you to ask me to talk, John.
Sorry, Kaz. I thought I saw your response there, and I was like, "Oh, this is personalised experience here."
I just, as John may well know, I had an event in Bristol. We had 400 people come along. Basically, it was kind of risk assessed in terms that we all socially distanced on College Green in small groups. We all wore masks. And I think there was an engineering approach to that, in that, engineering is very much about risk. I'm not a young person. If I get COVID, I'm at risk myself. But I took my own personal assessment was that it was more benefit to my mental well-being to actually have the protest, and it was a low risk thing if we all stuck by the rules. And I think there's as I mentioned, like, re-engineering pride. So I think you need to be agile as well, and agile is another theme for engineering. So if necessary, if the infection suddenly peaked in Bristol at that point, we'd have just cancelled it. So I think there's some engineering principles you can apply to maybe have some face-to-face meetings. Obviously not the big pride events that we normally expect.
No, fantastic. That's really awesome insight, and thank you. I love the engineering approach that you had there as well.
I've seen at JLR, you can have several thousand people parading in a controlled way onto site in one time. I've seen a marshalled exercise turning the whole lower stories of our multi-story car park to a marshalling area to get people parading in effect 2 meters apart to get them on site, to get them moved through and get a shift started. I'm hopeful that there are ways we can have an event where you control the flow and movement of people and get a very engineered approach to it.
No, fantastic. That's awesome, Mel. I'm not too sure though if you had experience with drag queens at Pride's there. I think it'll be more than 2 meters apart. The slow movement is terrible. So we've also had another question in from Mark, sort of highlighting the fact of future engineers. What can we do to support, I guess, the future engineers in the engineering industry? What advice would you have to them? That goes out to any of the panel there.
I think engineering is at the heart of solving the crisis that we've got. I think our colleagues from the Royal Institution, from the Royal Society of Engineering, have really pointed out how engineers can contribute, and engineering solutions have been really at the heart of getting life moving again. I think it's a hugely positive time for engineering.
No, that's fair.
John, I think Alex can elaborate on the activity she's had recently.
Yeah, I think just to, as I said before, I hope that engineering is changing, and these sort of principles such as focusing on sustainability or increasing digitalization are positive and adopted in the right way, and with taking engineers on the journey with those sort of leading the change. So with that, engineering jobs are becoming more complex, and it's all about sort of creating opportunities to reinforce what you're doing in that wider context. And what was being said before about John, you finding your work had new value, and how we can empower people and create something, I don't know, that is attractive, and with that maybe we can start to improve the diversity problem within engineering. I mean, COVID has been really difficult for lots of different minority groups, from the sort of women taking up lots of the childcare to BAME people affected much more severely, and then the implications of school closures on sort of those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds or LGBT plus communities being sort of forced maybe to stay in houses that aren't fit for the sort of care and nurture that they need. So I think it's been really difficult, and you know, where these groups are underrepresented, it's really important that like diversity is thought about as part of our economic recovery, and you know, that has additional benefits for innovation and for productivity. And you know, the academy itself is we're trying to think about how we transform from the inside as well, right? Because and you've already mentioned the exciting new framework, but we're also embarking on a project with the Lewis Hamilton Commission to try to improve diversity in motorsport. And in order to be able to lead the profession on this, we're rethinking our fellowship, and we've just launched a big campaign on a fellowship that's fit for the future, where we hope to have 50% of our nominees each year be from underrepresented groups. So yeah, I think the energy is there for some organizations. Hopefully we can make that a bit more widespread.
No, that's fantastic, and some great things that you mentioned there as well, especially impact of different diversity groups during the COVID crisis. So on that note, I think it's probably time to wrap up. I would like to really thank our panelists tonight. You have been fantastic, and it's been exciting to hear from you. I wish we had more time, but I don't want to go over too much because I'm a little bit a stickler for the rules. So no, thank you all, and I'd like to thank everyone for attending tonight. And we're hoping that we can obviously distribute this wider as well, because I think it's been a fantastic talk. I'd like to thank everyone, and please, if you're one final plug or two final plugs. One is to please join our bingo night tomorrow night, because it will be a lot of fun, and especially if the weather stays stormy, why not? And then also you want to win this fantastic 3D printed trophy that my lovely boyfriend has created. So please enter the Re-Eng photo competition. And thank you guys so much, and have a pleasant and lovely evening.
Thanks so much for putting it together, John and John.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been brilliant.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Have a lovely night. Thank you. Oh, here's John.
Thanks.
There he is.
Thank you. Bye.